Hi, everyone. Welcome to Maxable's webinar. I'm really excited about this month's webinar. I feel like I say that every month about webinars, but this one is especially huge because Governor Newsom signed 7 ADU bills into law last week. And these have been things that we have been advocating for and sending letters in about and, really keeping our fingers crossed because this is going to literally impact every ADU project in the state. And they passed. So this is like this huge monumental thing. We're all very, very excited. And so I'm really stoked to introduce our guest tonight, Xiomara, who is part of the Bay Area Council, which is a nonprofit, a very well-established nonprofit up in the Bay Area, where one of their big focuses is housing issues. And Xiomara is also on the board of the Casita Coalition as well, of which I'm also a partner. And so we kind of have our resident expert tonight to kind of walk us through all the things. So before I dive in, I want to apologize if my internet connection is not very good. I've been having internet problems for 2 days now, and so I called AT&T, and of course they can't come until Thursday to fix it. So I was like, guys, you have really horrible timing on this. So one of my colleagues is going to run my slides for me in hopes that the connection isn't too bad. So Sadie, if you could start the presentation, that would be amazing. And we've got a really action-packed hour ahead for you guys. So welcome to Decoded, the latest ADU bills. We're really excited to have you guys all here. Go ahead, next slide. So for those of you, I think most of you are probably familiar with Maxable. We're an educational resource that connects homeowners to basically everything they need to know about ADUs. There's a lot of things to understand about the territory that we're in. Homeowners who are interested in this have a lot of obstacles that they have to navigate, and we just try to make that whole process easier. So we're not a design build firm, we're not an architecture firm, but we want to make sure that you guys have all of the resources that you need to move forward as educated consumers. We want to make sure that clients aren't being taken advantage of, and we want to make recommendations on that will help you. So this webinar is part of our monthly series to bring in experts like Xiomara and basically talk about what's happening in the ADU space. Next slide, Sadie. So we've helped a lot of homeowners with accessory dwelling unit projects. We operate in San Diego, North San Diego County, the Bay Area, and Los Angeles. So if you're in one of those territories and you're like, how do I get started? What should I do? Please reach out to us. We can absolutely help you. And then one more slide just to touch on quickly before we dive into kind of the meat and potatoes of everything is we also have a lot of inspiration and additional information on our Instagram page and on our YouTube page. So on Instagram, we often post videos or photos or home tours of projects that we just think are really cool that you guys should see, or news about bills or kind of anything that grabs the headlines. So that's a really great resource for you guys. That's just if you're on Instagram. Next time you're looking at cute cat videos on Instagram or pictures on Instagram, you can look us up, Maxable Space. And then as well as YouTube, if you search for Maxable, we have a lot of really cool home tour videos. So anyway, I think that'll be a nice resource for you guys. So without further ado, I want to welcome Xiomara to our webinar and get started.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. And I know Maxable is an amazing organization, and you just demonstrated how impressive you really are. And so I'm sorry, you have made the presenter show my screen. Oh, I'm sorry. So I show my screen?
Yep, go ahead and share your screen now, and then you can just set your presentation to present, and everyone will be able to see you.
Got it. Oh, got it. Okay, great. Let's see. So
these webinars are always like a little bit of a technical issue.
Yeah. So, okay. Here we go. Show my screen. So I think. So you can see my PowerPoint?
It looks like it is pulling up now. So, yep, you're good to go.
Okay, great. So, yeah, just a little bit more about the Barry Council. We are a regional organization in the Bay Area, and we are a business member organization, and we focus on public policy issues, especially housing, amongst other very important pressing items. And in 2016, we passed SB 1069, just realizing that all the bigger things like CEQA reform and what have you were very challenging, and we saw that ADUs was a really great opportunity and the low-hanging fruit actually, and we're really excited that it's now gained traction. As Caitlin described, we were really excited to see the governor sign these ADU bills, and just really bringing down most of the remaining barriers to ADU creation. So, I'm just going to basically do a high-level overview of some of the legislations. For example, AB 670 by Assemblymember Friedman, which really has to do with HOAs, homeowner associations, or CIDs, common interest developments. And, these are unique in the larger housing landscape, not in the sense that they're not prevalent. It's exactly for that reason they are prevalent, and they have their own governing documents, the CC&Rs, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, that don't necessarily have to abide by the policies of the local jurisdiction. And that makes building ADUs challenging. And this is technically referencing the Davis-Sterling Act. So if you're interested in learning more, I bet some of you are part of an HOA or CID, so you're very much aware of this. But again, those are like the main documents that the homeowner has to abide to, because it's part of some of the benefits of a common area, common interests.
So
Um,
just to kind of recap that briefly, Xiomara, is HOAs were perhaps one of the only governing bodies that could overwrite the state law. And so the big deal about this was that homeowners, and we've had lots of homeowners reach out to us that were in HOA communities, the CC&Rs or whatever the HOA guidelines could basically say, no, we do not allow accessory dwelling units in this community, and that has been overturned.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really exciting. It's a huge opportunity, and exactly on that point, the impact is pretty huge. Where almost 5 million homes are impacted by this. Like there's people who live in these HOAs that want to build an ADU, but they can't. And almost 40% of our 40 million Californians are part of an HOA. So this is now giving this new opportunity to build ADUs there, which is really exciting. And it's been like almost I don't know, ironic or something, I can't think of the right word right now, or frustrating, because they have provided concessions with things like solar roofs or like TV antennas. And so when we're in this dire housing shortage, it makes all the sense to make the concession for a very valuable home. So some of the things, sorry, my panel is, oh, sorry about that. I was trying to move my panel. I can't do that at the same time. Okay, so the thing is that they don't quite comply with all the various other ADU laws that have been passed, and we'll talk about those shortly. They would have to adhere to some specific different sets of legislations, like the ones you see on the screen right now. So, for example, the HOA can still impose minimum and maximum sizes. They could impose the need for owner occupancy, meaning that the homeowner has to either live in the ADU or in the primary home. And Also, they have the HOA or CID, CID is able to require that it has to be a long-term lease, and really the reasoning behind that is to prevent the vacation rentals, for example, Airbnb.
So
And so that
still a really great step in the right direction. So if you're in the HOA community, it looks like you wouldn't have necessarily all the freedoms that homeowners would have outside of an HOA, but still, if it's the difference between preventing you from even being able to build at all and now having that opportunity, that's still a really big deal.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So it's basically like these, quote unquote reasonable restrictions that they're outlining that the HOA would impose, but still, again, a very exciting and huge opportunity. So the next one that we're going to dig into a little bit is the same lawmaker, Senator Bob Wieckowski, that did SB 1069 back in 2016 and kind of started this whole thing, opened the floodgates, is now SB 13. And one of the really exciting things that this legislation does is remove owner occupancy. So that makes it really restrictive. I think many of you know that sometimes people have, another second home, or they rent it out because they're traveling or what have you. So there's reasons why the homeowner doesn't live in their home, lots of reasons, and that makes it really prohibitive when you have this owner occupancy requirement where they have to live in the ADU or the primary home. So this is in place for just 5 years, and the thought is just to see how this would impact the concern of investor speculation. So the voiced pushback has been that companies could take advantage of this and buy tons of these homes and build ADUs, and so this, studies have shown time and again that the narrative is actually the opposite, that most homeowners that build ADUs is actually in fact for their loved ones, for students, etc., and is not really for the business of making profit. And so another big exciting thing about SB 13 is the change in impact fees that has been cited by the Turner Center as a major obstacle. And the Turner Center report recently, I think it was August of this year, demonstrated that these impact fees could range as high as $50,000 and just makes it prohibitive to build an ADU. So now that's been amended so that if the ADU is less than 750 square feet, no fees. If it's larger than 750 square feet, then it is proportionate to the primary home. So again, just trying to give a compromise for the various utilities and districts that do need fees, but the thought is that if the home is so small, then it's able to leverage the capacity of the existing utility infrastructure that's already provided from the larger primary house.
And these development and impact fees is one way that we're seeing cities push back against ADU development. So essentially when Senate Bill 1069 was passed and said, look, you have to allow ADUs in your local jurisdiction, one of the ways cities were like, great, well, we're going to exploit some loopholes and make it still really, really cost prohibitive for homeowners to be able to do this. So periodically we run into jurisdictions that are still charging exorbitant fees for accessory dwelling units. And so this is a really fantastic loophole that's being closed, where cities can no longer charge these $20, $30, $40, $50,000 just for the just for the fee to be able to build, not even covering your construction cost.
Yeah, exactly. And then the next item, exciting benefits or piece to SB 13 is an amnesty program. I think a lot of jurisdictions are still trying to figure out like what's the best way to bring illegal ADUs up to code. And what SB 13 does is that if the unit is out of code, then they now have another 5 years to come into compliance, and the local jurisdiction can't tell them otherwise. so that unless it's related to health and safety reasons. So that just gives the homeowner that much more flexibility to do that. And if your jurisdiction has an ADU policy or ordinance that maybe doesn't have one at all, or it's not in compliance, then again, that homeowner has another 5 years to bring it up to code. So basically just gives a pathway to bring that into compliance. So parking requirements. So SB 1069 did a lot of great things, including not requiring replacement parking if it's within half a mile of transit. There was a study, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but in Oregon, they looked at ADUs and they found that overwhelmingly ADU occupants tend to not have a car. They walk, they bike, they use public transit. And so if here that concept is very much true, and if you convert your garage into an ADU, you are now no longer required to provide a parking space. And that's great because that is actually really expensive to build a parking space, especially if you don't need a car, if you don't want a car. So that just, again, gives more flexibility.
Yeah, that's huge, because previously, if you were converting a garage and you were within half a mile of public transit, you had to replace the parking you were taking away. And now that's no longer possible. And while I'm very happy that that's the case, that means we also have to go into all the places on our website where we've cited that you need to replace your parking and quickly update everything for everyone.
Yeah, yeah. All right, and yeah, this is pretty straightforward, but basically, again, before it was 120 days for ministerial approvals, meaning that if you apply for an ADU, then you don't have to go through just the discretionary process. You don't have to notify your neighbors or put up signs or what have you. Yeah, it's pretty extensive, and it could be painful. So that was changed to ministerial approvals or over the counter to 120 days, and if not approved or denied, then it's automatically approved. And now that's been shortened to 60 days. Again, just making it that much more easier and faster to get ADUs online. And another really exciting thing is that, Caitlin, a lot of these things have been unfortunately abused, and Caitlin alluded to that earlier, with, for example, the fees. Like cities sometimes just layer on various barriers, and one of them is, for example, providing these planning and zoning requirements that make it really challenging to build an ADU. So now a homeowner doesn't have to do anything smaller than 800 square feet if it's an ADU. Doesn't have to be any lower than 16 feet, and the setbacks could be 4 feet side and rear. And that's really great because, again, cities sometimes impose things like 25 foot rear or side setbacks, and it basically makes it impossible to build an ADU. So again, this is really exciting and makes it that much more flexible.
I was just going to mention that. And I know we've done a lot of home evaluations with property owners, even up here in the Bay Area, like, for example, unincorporated Santa Clara County. I can't tell you how many site consultations we've done where the rear, they're all gung-ho, they want to build an ADU, and then the rear setback is 25 feet. Yeah. And the property line to the house is only 30 feet. So you're like, okay, like you literally can't do anything. And so having that rear and side setback reduced to 4 feet is such a game changer for so many people. I think actually that's probably one of the things I'm most excited about.
It's super exciting. Yeah, I was on Twitter and we were telling people exactly that. It's like, like your city now can't tell you to do that. So yeah. Like the only thing you can do before is like a doghouse or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And I think this is my last slide for SB 13. And another really exciting thing is that in general, HCD, California's Housing and Community Development Department, is taking a bigger role in housing, and I would just say that's true for the state of California. generally speaking. But this is important because I do think it's going to be challenging and take some time for cities to, even those who want to do the right thing, to really come into compliance. And so HCD is going to be that authority that ensures that cities are actually doing the work, updating their codes, their policies, and making all these wonderful new things happen so that ADU creation can actually come online. So again, the cities will have to report to HCD, and HCD, if they see that they are not coming into compliance with the new state ADU laws, then they have the authority to tell the Attorney General and pursue legal action. So that is a really exciting new way to hold everyone accountable.
Is that their actual logo, Xiomara?
I think so. I hope so.
So funny because it's like this is the enforcement mechanism, and then it looks like a little clip art graphic or something.
Yeah,
It doesn't
yeah,
look particularly threatening, but we
yeah.
did have we had a lot of questions come in about, well, what happens if my city doesn't, you know, doesn't abide by these new rules? Like what happens? And basically, finally, there's an enforcement mechanism with the state that you can kind of like tattletale on your city almost, and
Hmm.
have someone actually respond in a meaningful way.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot more authority. I think more and more like it's becoming uh, an important issue for the state and Sacramento to take a role because cities have had decades to do something with housing, and they're, I think, just realizing that they have to um, have more of authority and have a little bit of that pressure. So I do think it's a really good thing, and we'll actually see some things come into fruition.
Awesome.
And this one I basically combined because it's uh, a lot of these elements to SB 13, AB 68, and AB 81 are overlapping or the same language. So I just put them together basically because they're um, a lot of the shared same exciting things. And the big thing here is that now if the land is zoned for residential, including basically single family home residential, you can build not only one but two ADUs. So that means it could be an ADU and a junior ADU. A junior ADU is essentially if, for example, you have a bedroom, then you could, and it's 500 square feet, then you could add a kitchen or what have you, and make that like a livable space. And it's within the single family home. Um, and here with AB 68/AB 81, you could expand it another 150 square feet. So that means if you have like a detached garage, that could be your ADU, your 800 square foot ADU, and then you could expand your extra guest bedroom and make that your junior ADU. So in a sense, this has been, I think, framed in the media as triplexing California. I would maybe go to that extent, but conceptually, you could have three new homes on one single family lot, which is super exciting.
And just to be clear on this, because I know we'll get a lot of questions on that, it's you cannot build two detached accessory
Right.
dwelling units on a single property. It would have to be, you could have, for example, one detached unit on the property and then your JADU, which a JADU is always under 500 square feet and exists within the primary house.
Right, right. Yeah. So
And
if, mhm,
oh,
yeah.
sorry.
No,
There were
no.
some jurisdictions that allowed an accessory dwelling unit and a JADU on the property already, but they mandated that there was owner occupancy requirements if you were to do something like that. So that would not be the case now. You could have a JADU and an ADU and not need owner occupancy.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's super exciting. And yeah, again, going back to the zoning and planning requirements, no more minimum lot sizes. Again, you have a sometimes not that flexibility, and now that is provided with this new legislation. And those are the highlights, I would say, very high level of the slew of ADU laws. I'll close basically speaking about the Casita Coalition. So the Bay Area Council is one of the co-founders of this grassroots organization that really picked up steam over the past few years. And we now have over 100 of fantastic ADU leaders, advocates like Maxable, and we've been very involved with the ADU legislations, informing and leading and discussing and finally bringing into law from ADU bills to now state legislation. And we're all over California. It's very exciting. And Kaylin is one of our advisory board members. It's really important that even though it started in the Bay Area, it's important to have ADUs everywhere. So we're really excited to have her advice and leadership.
Thanks, Xiomara. And I'm really excited to be a part of the Casita Coalition. You got, just so everyone knows, they do have a Twitter handle, so you guys can follow them. And we meet in person periodically throughout the year. So we had our first kind of official meeting in Oakland. And it was really funny because we were talking about, well, what are, like, basically what the Casita Coalition is trying to do is identify what are the biggest barriers that homeowners are still up against, and how can we help alleviate those issues through policy and legislation. And so one of the big things that we were talking about in the Oakland meeting was HOAs and how that was a huge opportunity and a huge barrier for homeowners. And the next thing you know, we managed to get the HOA bill handled. And so a lot of that was the Bay Area Council and the Casita Coalition really like spearheading that initiative. So I'm really excited to be a part of it. And, you know, obviously tying into Maxable, we want to make sure you guys are educated on everything that's going on from a policy advocacy perspective, because the reality is you guys right now, having joined this webinar, probably know more than most city planners do within your local jurisdiction. So anyway, the Casita Coalition is another great resource to follow. And like I said, they do have a Twitter handle. Xiomara, do you know what the Twitter handle is so that they could follow that?
Yes, it's at Casita Coalition. I'm actually the Twitter handle person, so.
There you go. Maybe you'll have some new followers so we can check in.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So Sadie, can we jump in back into the Maxable slides, and then we'll move into questions after that?
Yep, sorry, just give me 1 second.
So we're just gonna kind of touch on a few more things, and then we'll open it up for questions. Xiomara, I know we had a ton of questions that people sent in that we're gonna do our best to answer before the end. And so before we go into that, though, we'll just kind of, I want to talk a little bit more about if a homeowner is interested in building an accessory dwelling unit, kind of what their next steps are. So if you're in San Diego, Los Angeles, or the Bay Area, we do offer ADU home evaluations. So this is a great opportunity for us to basically do all the research that you need for your property. So Sadie, if you can advance the slides. So we essentially do all the research on your property, and then we come to your house and we walk through everything that you would need to know kind of step by step. So we have ADU consultants, like I said, in San Diego, Los Angeles, and the Bay Area. We can do things like measure your site, go over the regulations, go through cost estimates. Like if you're like, gosh, how much would a garage conversion cost versus standalone unit? We can go over all of that. We've conducted well over 300 of these home evaluations. So we have a lot of data and a lot of research that we can share with you guys. We have a database of information that we draw off of. We work with local cities and jurisdictions. Depending on what your goals are, we can kind of tailor the consultation for you. So whether you're looking to do, you know, an accessory dwelling unit for an aging parent or for an aging in place opportunity, or you're just looking for cash flow because you want, you know, more financial stability, we can kind of tailor what our messaging is and the information we can provide you based off what your goals are. So anyway, I would encourage you guys, if you're interested in ADUs and you're just not sure where to start, that's a really fantastic resource. That service is $249. So it's a really cost-effective way on getting started and making sure you kind of get on the right track. So next, I think we're gonna open it up to Q&A. Oh, and if you are interested in something like that, you can book those on the Maxable website. And essentially you book the consultation, someone will reach out, we'll coordinate calendars and we'll come out to your house. So, okay, so let's jump into Q&A now. We collected a lot of, I think we had close to 100 questions come in. So we kind of sorted based off the ones that we felt like were most relevant to everyone. And so Sadie's gonna read off a couple questions, and if you guys have questions as well that you didn't submit ahead of time, there is a chat feature on the webinar, and so you guys can submit your questions now and we can go over some of those.
Okay, so we had a question from our very own Chris from Rulin Design Group. He had a really good question. How quickly must the city municipalities implement the new state laws?
So it takes an effect in January 2020. I mean, the jurisdictions that I've been interfacing with have been on hold with their ADU laws just because they wanted to see what was coming, and now they're having conversations with their attorney generals just to see what they have to massage. But come January, they have to have it ready to go. And obviously there are some provisions and elements to some of these legislations like the amnesty program or what have you that won't have a direct immediate effect. But yeah, that's the year.
So I actually have a question too, Xiomara. So essentially, after we saw Senate Bill 1069 go into effect, what it did was it wiped out all the local jurisdictional ordinances around accessory dwelling units. So I don't know the exact number of jurisdictions in California, but I think it's close to 540 different jurisdictions within California. And so what that bill did is it wiped all those out, and it said, look, we are faced with an affordability crisis. We need more units of housing. Accessory dwelling units are low-hanging fruit. We want to empower homeowners by removing a lot of these ridiculous regulations that will open up the possibility to build. And so after that bill was passed, all these local jurisdictions then had the opportunity to adopt their own ordinance around accessory dwelling units that they could control certain variables like owner occupancy or short-term rentals or minimum maximum build sizes or things of that nature. So a lot of those now have been wiped out. Do you expect that all the jurisdictions will now have to adopt new ordinances?
So basically, it would have to be at least what the state has in place with the new state ADU laws of this year, or it could be more progressive. So, for example, I know I think I saw one of the questions speak to about Redwood City, but Redwood City for a while was even more progressive than what was state law. They had like a 2-story ADU. And then they got pushed back from their constituents and neighbors, and so they regressed and took back. Yeah, they lowered. I know. So that's just an example of how like some cities want to do even more than what's in place for state law. So at a minimum, it has to be what the state is saying, but that doesn't mean that a homeowner could choose what their local jurisdiction has in place or what the state is saying, but it's just now that they could say, I opt out of what you say, Redwood City, and I want to do what the state is providing, that framework.
I see. So basically, if they don't have a new ordinance adopted as of January 1 and they're more restrictive than what the state law mandates, then they have to work off the state law until they're able to adopt their own ordinance, which would either have to comply with state law or be more progressive than what the state law mandates.
Yeah, basically. Or else they're out of compliance. Yeah.
Awesome. In which case the HCD swoops in and uses their enforcement mechanisms.
Exactly. Attorney General could get upset.
Got it. That doesn't sound like a person we want to piss off.
No.
All right, Sadie, what else do you have for us?
Is there hope that the past ADU bills will help in the coastal overlay zones where coastal development permits are very costly?
I actually don't know the answer to that question. I actually tried to look in the ADU bills to see language about coastal overzone and overlay zones, and I didn't see anything about that. So unfortunately.
Yeah, so my understanding of it is that, so this affects a lot of San Diego homeowners. And my understanding of it is that those homeowners, unfortunately, these bills will not alleviate any of those fees. That Coastal Commission is still a discretionary review process that homeowners have to go through. In San Diego, we see that it's an additional like 10 months of permitting time and an additional like $12,000 to $17,000 in review fees. And I don't think that any of these bills will impact that, unfortunately.
Yeah, that was my sense too from looking at the language. Said it would stay intact, basically the coastal overlay zoning. So.
And we do have a number of clients that are building in the coastal zones. I think that the big thing for that is just making sure that you understand going into it that it's a process you have to be patient with. But that there's still huge economic benefits. You know, there's a reason why building in coastal is difficult, and homeowners who do build ADUs in coastal zones can really reap the financial benefits of that, in the sense that typically the house value will increase more dramatically, the rents will be much higher because you're in an area that is very desirable to live in.
Higher ROI.
Higher ROI, yeah.
Because of investment, yes.
Next question. Do any of the bills exempt or address the 2020 solar mandate?
The solar mandate, I'm not sure. Yeah.
I think what she's referring to are the Title 24 calculations.
Oh, okay. You know, unfortunately, there was a bill, AB 69, that would have addressed some of that, but that's been put as a 2-year bill. So that's something I think that we will revisit next year.
Yeah. So for those of you who are concerned about solar, essentially Title 24s are the energy requirement mandated by the state. And so every ADU or residential or commercial project has to meet Title 24 requirements before being submitted. And essentially what that states is that, look, this unit that I'm building is a certain amount energy efficient based off what the California state standard is. And so starting in 2020, those Title 24 calculations are being updated. And the new requirement is that buildings hit net zero energy consumption, which it basically means that they're consuming the same amount of energy that they're producing. And so really the only way to hit those requirements as it currently stands would be to be installing solar panels on your ADU. So we're still kind of waiting for the official kind of like tactical implementation of how that will work out, but it looks like detached units will certainly require solar panels. There's a small chance that maybe garage conversions or attached units might be able to kind of exploit some loopholes in that, and we'll certainly keep you guys posted. But I don't think there's going to be a way to get around that solar panel starting next year.
And I think I would just
sorry.
add, oh no, I was just going to add that largely a lot of these requirements make sense for like larger homes, and that's why there is an exploration for doing something like a small building code and related requirements like energy efficiencies, just because ADUs are a naturally energy efficient home. They have less materials and it requires less construction costs, and because of that, that's something that we definitely want to continue to pursue for next year.
The Casita Coalition will stay busy.
Yes, yeah. We have a long list.
Yeah.
How do you see building departments implementing the 60-day requirement to approve permits? Because building departments have had such a hard time getting these permits approved in such a short amount of time. How do you see them handling that?
Yeah, so I would say that, especially for the good faith cities, they're already looking at ways to be proactive about this. I think the best example is, for example, like City of San Jose, where they have a Tuesday ADU day, and the homeowner can literally come in the same and leave the same day with the ADU permit. So it would be an expedited permit approval process where you come in with your plans and they just sit down and figure it out with you right then and there. And that's really breaking down the silos in the cities with planning and building, what have you, and just doing what it's possible. So it is going to take a lot of initiative and work from the cities, but I have faith that, especially when cities are trying to be good actors in that sense.
Yeah. And I know that's, yeah, I mean, I think we'll continue to advocate to try to help cities see where policy updates can really help them in that sense. And I think San Jose is a really good example of that. You know, I think one of the frustrations we've had on our side as we research properties for homeowners is, you know, you might call, and this is, I think, why the home evaluations are so valuable for people, is that, you know, you'll call the planning department and ask a question about accessory dwelling units, and they're like, oh, well, that's a building issue. I have no idea what the answer to that is. And you're like, okay, and then you call building and you wait, and eventually someone maybe calls you back and you're like, okay, well, I have this question. They're like, oh, well, that's an engineering question. We don't handle that. Or sometimes you'll have planning and building, you know, volleyball you back and forth between the two departments trying to get one answer. And so I think the more that cities can kind of streamline that process for homeowners, and certainly Maxable hopes to be a role in that as well, where we can help, you know, cut down on some of the confusion based on the sheer volume of projects we're helping homeowners with, that will help as well.
That's a really great point. I just want to add to that a little bit, where cities, there is a capacity issue. And so I think cities are becoming more and more creative and leveraging their resources, such as Maxable and other pro ADU advocacy groups and businesses and organizations, to ensure that ADU creation isn't being stalled just for the sake of bureaucracy. So I do think that cities will find a path, and I'm optimistic.
Yeah, and actually another thing that it just kind of popped into my mind too, we had a big event this past Saturday, and we had San Diego's deputy director of city planning there, and he was announcing that San Diego was going to do some same day permits for ADUs as well.
Exciting. Great.
Yeah, so there's just a lot of really, I mean, I think there are, even though cities get a bad rap, there's a lot of cities out there that recognize that this is a huge issue that needs to be overcome, and that ADUs can play a really big role in that process. And so we are actually seeing a lot of cities kind of take really big leaps and bounds forward in looking at that. So props.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to. Yeah, totally. I couldn't agree more. It's really easy to like shame the cities, but we also have to celebrate those ones who are doing the right thing. So very, very good point.
Right.
Can the no occupancy requirement be retroactive to an ADU that's already completed or approved? So like, for example, say they already have an ADU built. Does that 5 years of no owner occupancy requirement still apply to them?
I mean, if it's existing, like I would say no, it wouldn't. But I don't think you would kick out the person, for example. So, but yeah, it's now state law. So that policy is no longer valid, I would say. But I think obviously you would have to let the lease or what have you run out.
Xiomara, that kind of brings up another question that I know homeowners have voiced, has been like, okay, let's say I want to build an ADU with the intention of renting out my main house and renting out the accessory dwelling unit. When those 5 years are up, that kind of privilege of not having owner occupancy be revoked from me?
Yeah. I would say yes, technically, but I am banking that this 5-year provision is going to be extended. I think it's not unlikely that these type of legislations that have a sunset stay sunsetted and they're extended. So I don't want to make promises, but I'm very confident that this is not going to just stay in place for 5 years.
Yeah. So I think part of the reason why there's like a 5-year clause to this right now is because there's the people who are kind of anti-ADU and don't want to see ADUs built are very fearful. And I think there's been kind of a lot of fear mongering around, like I've seen Facebook groups, for example, talking about how ADUs will destroy neighborhoods and change the character of everything, when so much data shows that for the most part, people are building these for family members, that they're being used responsibly. In fact, in Portland, which is kind of like the ADU capital of the United States, they've been doing ADUs way longer than California has. And I think they're permitting, I mean, Portland's not that big of a city, and they're permitting like 600 to 700 ADUs a year. And I think the latest study showed that 70% were owner occupied, even though that wasn't any kind of requirement. So my personal opinion or take on it was that this is a way to kind of pacify people who are like really anti-ADU, to say like, look, we're just gonna do a trial run on this, so don't freak out too much. We're gonna allow for 5 years. We're gonna see how it goes, and if all hell doesn't break loose, then we can just continue in this vein.
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly right. Like, this is a big test case, just so to appease those that have raised concerns. And I'm pretty sure the sky's not going to fall in 5 years. So I think everyone's going to be pleasantly surprised when they see how positive this is going to be for Californians, for the housing shortage, and for communities.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have one person that wants to know the difference between permitting and plan check, because one takes longer than the other.
Plan check. So, I mean, permitting is like going through the process to get the actual legal approvals for the ADU. I'm not really sure plan check. Do you know, Caitlin?
I'm a little confused on that question also. So essentially what happens is, after your architect or your designer draws up your plans, they put together a submittal package for the city. And so those plans are going to work their way through various departments, and those departments are going to kind of give their stamp of approval or say, look, you need to remedy these different things. So it'll go through, for example, planning and building, and like engineering, safety, like fire and safety, and each of those departments will kind of give their stamp of approval to those plans. So once you have all those stamps of approval, then you get your permit and you're allowed to build your unit.
That might be specific to a certain jurisdiction, but yeah. But I think the bigger takeaway is that ADUs don't have to do that for the most part anymore. So that is a long, extensive permitting process, and now that's limited to 60 days, and it's a quick, more efficient process, as opposed to going through more extensive, like last year from previous.
So one of our team members who does consultations in San Diego used to be a city planner. And so he's typing me little notes right now that he wants me to read out loud.
Oh, great. Yeah. All right.
So he's saying that plan check is a review of construction drawings, and site plan review is for the department approvals. So hopefully that clarifies. So for those of you who are in San Diego and want to do a site consultation with us, we have very quality people on our team.
They're here in real time.
Right there in real time. We get you answers. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Timothy. He's sending me a little smiley emoji, so I think he's happy.
Oh.
Awesome. Okay, Sadie, I think we've got time for one last question. So if you want to give us one more question to answer, we'd be happy to cover that.
Yeah, so Xiomara, you talked briefly about the HCD and how they're implementing the new laws and making sure that cities are actually in compliance with the new state laws. Can you go into a little bit more detail about how exactly they're implementing these and making sure that all of the cities are following?
Mhm. Yeah, so basically, every city has to report to HCD about how they're updating their ADU ordinance or ADU policy, and then HCD has to confirm that is aligned with the new state laws, and whether or not they are or are not, they make that decision. If they're not, if they have good evidence that the city is not coming into compliance in good faith, that's when they report it to the Attorney General. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky because the Attorney General could do something like, and you might have seen headlines of this recently, they would send a letter threatening to sue the city for not being in compliance. Like recently, they did that with San Bruno when they were out of compliance with their housing element for not approving a project that was in compliance. So they were in violation of the Housing Accountability Act, for example. So I think that it could escalate to a point where they would be in violation of what's called the Housing Accountability Act, and then that's when fees could come into play. But it seems like that's a longer process, and I would think that when the Attorney General comes into play, the letter would be a back and forth, and it's going to be a process. I would say like the other piece to that is just having the Casita Coalition and our fellow partners to really help hold cities accountable. That's actually a really big part of our larger goals and objective. One of our members, they're called Carla, and I'm forgetting what the acronym stands for exactly, but I think it's the California Renters Legal Education Federation or Fund. But their whole reason for existing is to essentially sue cities. And so if the cities aren't doing their job when it comes to housing, and that is in the case also with ADUs, then they pursue that city for legal reasons. So that could be another way for us to ensure that cities are actually having in compliance with these new state laws.
That's happening with Whittier right now. I mean, there's been a lawsuit brought against them because they're not in compliance with their ADU code. And unfortunately, we do run into cities periodically that aren't in compliance. So yeah, I think Casita Coalition is a fantastic resource for that. We at Maxable, we try to help people with that as well. So if you're hearing of issues like that, reach out, and there's probably some support and resources that we can give to those things. Awesome. Well, Xiomara, thank you so much for putting those slides together and kind of educating us on all this new stuff and everything that you're doing at Bay Area Council and Casita Coalition. I know we're really appreciative of it here at Maxable, and I know that all of our viewers and the people that visit our website are also super appreciative. So anyway, thank you for carving some time out of your Tuesday night to talk with all of us.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so excited that you have such a strong following, well deserved, and it's really exciting all that you're doing for ADUs. And I really do. Like I said before, I'm very optimistic. And every homeowner is empowered to be part of the solution when it comes to this housing crisis. So please take advantage. This is a call to action. If you can, build an ADU in your backyard. So again, thank you, Caitlin, for your leadership, and thanks to everyone for listening.
All right, awesome. Okay, good night, everyone. If you have any questions, reach out to us, and we'll continue to update you guys through newsletters and webinars and things like that. And if you're kind of on the fence and wondering, if you should move forward, we can certainly help you in those home evaluations as well. So use us as a resource.